A storm of swords. The icy winds howled across the desolate landscape beyond the wall, carrying with them the scent of death and the promise of a winter unlike any the realm had seen in 1,000 years. Jon Snow, his black cloak whipping about him, stood atop the massive ice structure, his eyes scanning the darkness for any sign of his missing brothers. The wildling host, led by Mance Rayder, the king beyond Thual, was on the move. Thousands upon thousands of free folk, giants, astride mammoths, skin-changers with their beast companion, all fleeing south from a terror that Jon had only glimpsed in his darkest nightmares. "The dead are coming," Ygritte had told him, her fiery hair a stark contrast to the bleak surroundings. "And when they come, Crow, you'll be glad of all these swords to hide behind." Jon's hand tightened on Longclaw's pommel. The Valyrian steel swore a comforting weight at his side. He had made his choice, turning his cloak to infiltrate the wildling ranks. But with each passing day, the line between duty and desire blurred further. Miles to the south, in the war-torn Riverlands, Arya Stark continued her perilous journey. Disguised as a boy and going by the name Ari, she had seen more death and destruction than any child should. The brutality of war had hardened her, turning her into something fierce and dangerous. Her path crossed with the Brotherhood without banners, a group of outlaws led by the Lightning Lord, Beric Dondarrion. In their company, Arya glimpsed a different kind of justice, rough and immediate, yet tempered with a concern for the small folk that the High Lord seemed to have forgotten. But it was her encounter with Sandor Clegane, the fearsome hound, that would shape her destiny. Kidnapped by the scarred warrior, Arya found herself on a twisted road trip across the war-ravaged countryside, her hatred for her captor warring with a growing understanding of his damaged psyche. In King's Landing, the Lannisters reveled in their victory over Stannis Baratheon. But their triumph was far from secure. Tyrion Lannister, his face now marred by a vicious scar from the Battle of the Blackwater, found himself cast aside despite his crucial role in saving the city. As he recuperated from his wounds, Tyrion began to realize the precariousness of his position. In a world that valued physical prowess and noble birth, a disfigured dwarf had few allies. His father, Tywin, now Hand of the King, regarded him with barely concealed contempt. "You are an ill-made, spiteful little creature full of envy, lust, and low cunning," Tywin told him, his voice cold as ice. "Men's laws give you the right to bear my name and display my colors, since I cannot prove that you are not mine. But neither gods nor men shall ever compel me to turn Casterly Rock over to you." The words cut deeper than any blade, reopening old wounds and festering resentments. Tyrion's quick wit and cunning mind, once his greatest assets, now seemed to work against him at every turn. Across the narrow sea, Daenerys Targaryen's legend continued to grow. With her newly acquired unsullied army and her 3 rapidly growing dragons, she carved a path of liberation through Slaver's Bay. As Astapor had fallen, its cruel masters put to the sword. Now, her sights were set on Yunkai and Meereen. But with each victory, the complexity of rule became more apparent. Freeing slaves was one thing governing a foreign land. With ancient customs and deep-seated resentments was another entirely. Daenerys found herself grappling not just with external enemies, but with the conflicting desires of her heart. "I will answer injustice with justice," she declared, her violet eyes blazing with determination. But as she would soon learn, justice was rarely clear-cut in a world of shifting allegiances and ancient grudges. Back in Westeros, the War of the Five Kings reached its brutal climax. Robb Stark, the young wolf, undefeated on the battlefield, found his campaign undone by politics and betrayal. His decision to marry Jeyne Westerling, breaking his betrothal to a daughter of House Frey, set in motion a chain of events that would lead to one of the most shocking moments in Westerosi history. The Red Wedding, as it would come to be known, was a masterpiece of treachery orchestrated by Tywin Lannister, Roose Bolton, and Walder Frey. Under the sacred laws of guest right, Robb, his mother, Catelyn, and much of the northern leadership were brutally slaughtered. The halls of the twins ran red with blood as the Stark forces were caught completely unawares. The haunting strains of "The Rains of Castamere" played as crossbow bolts rained down and blades flashed in the torchlight. Catelyn Stark, in her final moments, pleaded for her son's life. "On my honor as a Tully," she told Lord Walder, "on my honor as a Stark, I will trade your boy's life for Robb's, a son for a son." But there was no honor to be found that night. Roose Bolton, his betrayal complete, delivered the final blow to Robb. "Jaime Lannister sends his regards," he whispered, as he thrust his sword into the young wolf's heart. The news of the Red Wedding spread across the Seven Kingdoms like wildfire, reshaping the political landscape overnight. The North was in chaos, the Riverlands subjugated, and the Lannisters' grip on power seemed stronger than ever. But even as one threat was eliminated, others loomed on the horizon. In the Vale, Petyr Baelish, known to most as Littlefinger, had maneuvered himself into a position of power, with Lysa Arryn under his thrall and Sansa Stark hidden away as his daughter. Littlefinger's web of intrigue grew ever more complex. Sansa, still reeling from her time as a hostage in King's Landing, found herself torn between gratitude towards her savior and a growing unease at his intentions. The Game of Thrones had made her worry, and she began to see the world through more cynical eyes. "Life is not a song, sweetling," Littlefinger had told her once. "You may learn that one day to your sorrow." Those words echoed in her mind as she navigated the treacherous currents of the Vale's politics. Meanwhile, on the Iron Islands, a Kingsmoot was called to determine the successor to Balon Greyjoy. Asha Greyjoy, Balon's daughter, put forth her claim, advocating for peace and prosperity. But it was Euron Greyjoy, the Crow's Eye, returned from exile, who captured the Ironborn's imagination with promises of dragons and conquests. Euron's victory sent ripples across Westeros and beyond. His ambitions were not limited to the Seven Kingdoms. His gaze was fixed on the east, where Daenerys and her dragons represented the key to unimaginable power. As these events unfolded, a different kind of drama played out in King's Landing. The royal wedding between King Joffrey and Margaery Tyrell, meant to cement the alliance between their houses, instead became the scene of another shocking twist. The feast was lavish, the wine flowed freely, and Joffrey was in rare form, his cruelty on full display. But as he raised his goblet in yet another toast, something went terribly wrong. The boy king began to choke, his face turning purple, his eyes bulging in terror. In the chaos that followed, accusations flew. Tyrion, who had been the target of Joffrey's abuse throughout the feasts, found himself arrested for regicide. Sansa Stark, Tyrion's unwilling bride, vanished in the confusion, spirited away by agents of Littlefinger. The death of Joffrey sent shockwaves through the capital. Cersei, mad with grief and paranoia, became more unstable than ever. Tywin Lannister moved quickly to secure the succession, placing the young Tommen on the throne. But the foundations of Lannister power, seemingly unassailable just hours before, now showed signs of cracking. Far to the north, at the Wall, matters came to a head. The wildling army, 100,000 strong, launched their assault on Castle Black. Jon Snow, having escaped the wildlings and warned his brothers of the impending attack, now found himself at the heart of the defense. The battle raged for days, a desperate struggle against overwhelming odds. Giants battered the gates, mammoths tore at the wooden structures, and waves of wildlings crashed against the meager defenses. Jon, stepping into a leadership role he never sought, rallied the brothers of the Night's Watch. The Night's Watch defends the realm, he reminded them, his voice carrying over the din of battle. And tonight, we are the realm's last hope. It was Stannis Baratheon, arriving with his remaining forces, who turned the tide. The would-be king, acting on Melisandre's visions, had abandoned his campaign for the Iron Throne to answer the Watch's call for aid. The wildling host was crushed between the hammer of Stannis' cavalry and the anvil of the Wall. In the aftermath of the battle, Jon found himself elevated to the position of Lord Commander of the Night's Watch. It was a bittersweet victory, tinged with the loss of friends, and the knowledge that the true enemy, the others and their army of the dead, was still out there, waiting. As a storm of swords drew to a close, the Game of Thrones had been irrevocably changed. Old powers had fallen, new alliances were forming, and the threat of winter loomed larger than ever. Daenerys Targaryen, now the Queen of Meereen, grappled with the challenges of rule and the growing unruliness of her dragons. Tyrion Lannister, convicted of a crime he didn't commit, fled across the narrow sea with a price on his head. Arya Stark set sail for Braavos, seeking the House of Black and White and the skills of the Faceless Men. And in the far north, beyond the Wall, the army of the dead continued its inexorable march south. The long night was coming, and with it, a threat that made the squabbles of kings seem petty by comparison.